Well, there are a lot of challenges that one would meet if they want to become the next AUC chairperson, and Raila Odinga is not an exception to these challenges. Well, in this session, I want us to declutter the noise. I want us to remove the notions of Francophony, Anglophony, and Lusophony. Put that aside, and we speak about the real issues that Raila Odinga is going to face while he is going for the AUC chairperson bid.
Excellencies, I'm ready to serve. My heart is ready and my hands are steady, and with your support, I shall get the opportunity to be of service to Africa, the cradle of mankind. I am made in Eastern Africa for Africa.
Well, to understand this better, I would like to explain a few things here. One is that Raila Odinga is vying for the AUC chairpersonship as an individual first, then the states come later. That means that it is Raila Odinga's name that is out there rather than Kenya's name being out there. So Raila Odinga, in his own person, first of all, went and submitted his credential and said that I want to vie for the AUC chairpersonship. And that meant that Kenya now will look at if there are any other candidates in Kenya who would like to vie, and there was no other candidate from Kenya. So Kenya chose to support Raila Odinga. So Kenya is financing the campaigns and everything, sponsoring the candidacy of Raila Odinga, but Raila Odinga's name as a person is the one that is on the ballot. That is the first thing. The second thing that you have to understand is that it is not countries that will vote for or against Raila Odinga. It is presidents. So we are talking about presidents being able to cast their ballot depending on who they see fit as the person who can lead the Africa Union. Another thing is that the Africa Union is not above the president. It is an organization that brings up the African agenda together forward to the goals that Africa wants to achieve. So the Africa Union is simply an organization that brings all these countries together through representatives and presents the Africa's manifesto or agenda to the world. And that is now the role of the AUC chairperson to lead such an organization. So if we put that aside, now we bring the candidacy of Raila Odinga. And if you look at the African states, you'll realize one thing. There are differences in governance. And this governance issue is the one that is going to be very, very pertinent and dear to African presidents as they are going to elect their AUC chairperson. You know that there are countries in Africa that ascribe to democracy, and then there are countries in Africa that have a hybrid of dictatorship and democracy. There are countries that have elections but keep on electing the same leaders over and over again. Leaders have been in power for more than 30 years. We know those countries. And then there are countries in Africa where they don't have anything like democracy. They have one leader and that's it. And that leader stays in power regardless. They don't even mind about elections or anything like that. And then there are countries that are led by juntas. There are countries that are led by military strong men who have taken power illegally. Now, as the AUC chairperson, you really have to balance all these throughout. Now, that's why I said, let us put the Francophony, Anglophony, and Lusophony aside, and we speak about these pertinent issues, because this is the real issue that is going to face Raila Odinga. As I said, these are presidents who are going to vote by themselves. They're not going to say that Uganda or Chad or Mauritania has voted for. No, it's the president of Mauritania, it's the president of Togo that is going to cast that ballot. That president is going to consider a lot of things when they are voting either for Mohamed Yusuf or Raila Odinga. They are going to consider, is this person going to make me lose power? Because presidents are going to be concerned about their stay in power. So they don't want a person who is going to threaten their stay in power. And they don't want anyone who's going to destabilize the organization of those countries, wherever they are. I'm not saying that Raila Odinga is going to destabilize, nor am I saying that Mohamed Yusuf is going to destabilize, but that is the real issue that these presidents are going to look into when they want to choose a particular leader in that seat, the AUC seat. Now, if you go to South Africa, you'll find that many countries in South Africa are democratic. Talk about South Africa, talk about Botswana, talk about Namibia and other countries down south. These countries ascribe mostly to democracy. They choose their leaders frequently, and these leaders most of the time change from one to another. If you look at other countries in East Africa, you'll find there is some balance of democracy, but we have seen presidents who have held in power, even if elections are being held. But if you go to the West, you'll find that now you're starting to see strong men, you're starting to see juntas. If you go to the Central, talk about Chad, talk about Central African Republic, you're going to find leaders that have overstayed in power and do not show any signs of leaving power because of different reasons that these countries better know. So these presidents are the constituents that Raila Odinga is going to represent. So for him to go and win their support, he must speak their language. He must assure them that I am not going to interfere in the business of your country. That is one thing. That I am not going to call for democracy across Africa just blindly, because these presidents will surely not support anyone who will say that they are going to install democracy in Africa. That one I can assure you, because they are going to see that as a threat to their reign in power. So the message that Raila Odinga needs to portray is that I am going to represent Africa. I am going to represent the goals of Africa about poverty, about representation in global bodies. These are the issues that Raila Odinga would need to speak more, other than start to speak about democracy and how governments should be led. So that will be a very, very huge factor when you're speaking about the support from these presidents and whether they are going to cast their ballot for Raila Odinga or Mohamed Yusuf. We know that Djibouti is a dictatorship. Djibouti has been led by one single president for a very, very long time. And that one now will sing the song of nations that have sort of authoritarian leadership, where leaders have stayed in power for a long time. So you can do your maths and see which countries have authoritarian leadership and which countries have democracy, and then you'll see countries that will easily vote for Raila Odinga, because there are many countries in Africa also that ascribe to democracy. Call it Nigeria, Ghana, call it South Africa, South African states, call it Seychelles, Cape Verde. All these countries are ascribing to democracy. Then there are countries that do not really factor in democracy, and they are there, and do you know them? So these are the constituents that will immediately start to favor different sides, depending on because even democratic countries will not want a leader that is not going by their ways of governance, because that one will also not go by their beliefs, by their systems of governance in their particular countries. Well, another major factor that Raila Odinga really has to take keen concern of is the increasing influence of Russia and China in Africa. And that cannot be ignored, because right now, as we're speaking, the Western African states are not really very, very close to France. The Francophone thing is slowly dying, although there can be ties because these countries have those roots with their colonial powers. But it is important to understand that there is an increasing effort from Russia and China to influence Africa. And these countries, some of them are indebted to China. We know that there are countries, including Kenya, that have very, very huge debts from China. There are countries in the Western Africa and Central Africa that are working very closely with Russia in terms of security. So these global powers are going to also influence the way these presidents are going to vote. If you're going to have an AUC chairperson who is going to threaten Russian interests, if you have an AUC chairperson who is going to threaten China or Chinese interests in Africa, then this China or Russia would, in one or another, influence a president not to support this person. So these are the balances that Raila Odinga has to factor in when we are talking about the AUC chairperson. It is not an easy go. as just going to a president and saying that I will do this for Africa, this and that. There are personal interests of presidents as individuals who wants to stay in power, as individuals who don't want a destabilized government, that are going to play very, very important roles when it comes to the election of the next AUC chairperson in February of 2025. So those two will really play out aside from the Francophone, Anglophone, and Lusophone, which are categories of countries based on their relationship with their colonial powers. Therefore, the speech that Raila Odinga gave in his AUC bid launch, when different presidents came here at KICC to listen to his launch, is very, very important for him to stick to that script. As a Pan-African, as a person who is looking forward to Africa being represented out there, as a person who is willing to work with president regardless of the internal organizations, to work with presidents to put the name of Africa forward. That is the script that Raila Odinga needs to go with. He should drop any other influence that can come from different countries, whether countries will want strong men in power, whether countries will want democratic leaders in power. Those are speeches that Raila Odinga needs to drop right now and simply focus on the main agenda of the Africa Union as an organization, to put the interest of Africans forward and not care about the internal organization of different countries. Because if you do that, you're going to touch the nerve of these presidents who are supposed to elect you when 2025 February comes.